Alors bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue dans la session des meilleures pratiques en matière d'opération et de cybersécurité. Mon nom est Christian Descoteaux, je suis de la compagnie Novipro, j'agis à titre de directeur de compte pour cette entreprise-là. Aujourd'hui, on a le plaisir d'accueillir Brian Ross de Arctic Wolf. Je vais vous le présenter. En fait, je vais faire sa bio très rapidement. Je vais la faire en anglais puisque la session va être en anglais. Ça va permettre de passer la parole pour la présentation de Brian. So Brian is a cybersecurity advisor that specializes in SOC as a service. Brian views the overall threat landscape from a unique vendor-agnostic lens. He has held several technologist roles over the past 16 years. Brian is currently a member of InfraGard, which is a partnership between the FBI and members of the private sector for the protection of the US critical infrastructure. Through seamless collaboration, InfraGard connects owners and operators within critical infrastructure to the FBI to provide education, information sharing, networking, and workshop on emerging technologies and threats. I'm going to turn on the mic to Brian, but in the meantime, if you ever have questions, I invite you to use the chat. Je vous invite à utiliser le chat pour les questions durant la conférence. Et aussi, à la fin de celle-ci, s'il y a d'autres questions qui vous viennent à l'idée, je vous invite aussi à le faire directement dans le boot du conférencier. Alors, sur ce, je tourne la parole à Brian. Merci.
Hello, my name is Brian Rawls. I'm a security operations advisor. I support Arctic Wolf, and today we're going to walk through some of the state of cybersecurity and some of the Arctic Wolf overview of the platform and different of the cybersecurity needs. I'd like to start with the vendor agnostic state of security. If you're viewing my screen here, you can see I'm going to kind of walk down all these different lists. So if we're looking at the perception of cybersecurity impacts from COVID, how it worked, displaced a lot of the efforts from on-premise to the home office, things like that. There's a lot of different things that we need to address or have been addressed based on taking those PCs out of the perimeter defenses and taking them back to the remote workforce. All these offices, honestly, a lot of things broke when this happened. So you're giving laptops to people that traditionally probably had desktops working in an office. A lot of those endpoint protections and different things and policies set to those were meant for on-premise. And when we moved those to a remote facility, normally a person's home, a lot of those policies broke. So we had to readdress a lot of those different things. The same thing with email. We now have continued VPN usage, and what happens when people are not on the VPN? Do we have visibility to those PCs to see what they're actually doing? A huge adoption of cloud as well, which is reflective of everything. So Office 365 is very prevalent, always has been. It adopted even more. Cloud-based storage platforms, other things that were non-sanctioned started to be adopted by remote workers as well. And that's very risky for the companies because they don't know where that data is going and what platform it's being shared on. So things that you really have to keep in mind when you're talking about this. The next piece here is information security budgets. So the budget you have for security, and a lot of people don't have much because there's not an overwhelming return on investment here. This is more of an insurance policy that we're going to put in place by investing in technology in order to prevent us from getting breached, hacked, whatever you want to call it. The biggest thing we've seen is sometimes the tools that have been utilized for so long. So we can actually start looking at other options out there. There are other options that have more advanced technologies that might be at the same price point or even less than you are utilizing your current endpoint protection, firewall, whatever it may be. So you can actually gain budget by re-looking at what you have to see if there's anything else on the market that may accommodate a better security option for you at a lower price. Other things I found to come up with more security budget has been looking at other tools you've adopted. And one thing that we really were looking at is we had about 3 or 4 different platforms that we use. We had the Zoom, we had Teams, we had WebEx, we had GoToMeetings, we had all these different tools. And we had an Office 365 license, so why don't we just go back to Teams, which is already being paid for, and get rid of some of those other platforms? That's another way to really create additional revenue and budget for security, is by looking at everything else in your environment, seeing if we can remove and standardize on just one. So that's a really good way of creating that security budget. Now, this kind of ties into it. Security ROI, reduced risk. The same thing is, you're looking at these tools for cost savings, but you're also looking at these tools because every day there's advancements. There's new products coming out. There's new things that are more advanced that are going to catch more than existing legacy type products that you may want to evaluate. So you can lower your reduction of risk by reviewing what you currently have, adopting something new, and actually have a cost savings if you find the right tools. So something just to keep in mind. The other big piece of this is staffing. So staffing has been very hard in the last few years. We've had more and more breaches, more and more talent that's required, and more price tags. And the people that are in the SMB space are still competing with people in the enterprise space. So they have, deeper pockets, more capabilities to bring people on than the smaller guys looking for that same talent at a lower price point. So definitely something you really have to keep in mind when you're doing something like that is staffing. And staffing is so important because it's really an effectiveness problem, because you're buying all these tools, and if you don't have the trained staff to do something with these tools, they're really not doing much for you. So staffing is a very important part of this as well. And then going to the other side, the hybrid security models. What do I insource? What do I outsource? So it's really the combination of everything right now, especially with this remote workforce. Should I have talent and go hire people internally? Well, yes. But if you get up to certain levels, if you're starting to do like a SIM adoption, you're going into deeper dive into EDRs and different EDR platforms, things deeper into email security, whatever it may be, we want to make sure that those are going to work on premise as well in a cloud environment for where this hybrid solution is kind of intermixing as well. So when we're talking about something like we need log correlation, we need relay over to comply with something like a framework or a regulatory compliance, that requires continuous monitoring, which requires a lot of staff. You buy something like a SIM, a security information event manager, if you're not familiar, to correlate all that information. Well, you still need the bodies to do something with it. So that's where I see kind of a third-party adoption might be a little better approach, where they might already have the SIM in place, and then they have the staff to do something and then share those results with you. Very important. So kind of how that might work, and we can always get more in depth on that on a different call. A large risk opportunity is everything we've seen in the news. The ransomware breaches are just overwhelming right now. There's new publications out from the U.S. Treasury Department that are now going to fine people that pay the ransoms even more than they have in the past. So now people were just paying ransoms to get their information, their data back, but now they're going to get more heavily fined because they're doing so, because they see that as treasonous act. So now we have that to deal with as well. So more and more adoption of security just to overcome these, and a lot of that is just eyes on glass, watching things happen as they come through. We can't have dwell time at over 200 days, which is where it is at right now. Big things like that, we really need to address these ransomware things that are coming. The deficits, we have a lot of different disparate tools out there we're adopting, but you also need security professionals that are highly certified in each one of those to understand what to do with the data. So there's been a recent thing that I read, and I forgot where I read it, but they're saying that SIM technology I was mentioning before, only 40% of people that have a SIM only use it on a basis to do reporting and for auditing purposes. That's all they use it for. So it's actually not being effectively as a 24/7, 365 continuous monitoring type tool. I mean, that's kind of concerning to me. And then the last thing is cyber fatigue. So you do get these professionals in, you're overburdening them. They are working in round-the-clock shifts, 365, 24/7. Usually that's 5 people doing a 24/7 sweep over a course of a week. Obviously, they want days off, nights, weekends, all those is where we need heavy monitoring done. So a lot of this work is being done on the nights and the weekends. So it's really hard on everybody there. They're working 10-hour shifts usually to do this as well. It's hard on the eyes. It's hard on the bodies. You're sitting, your stiffness. You really have fatigue. And this is overwhelming because security never stops. That's the biggest problem. So we need more professionals in order to take care of this fatigue. And that might also be a piece that we want to go over and look for those third parties that can do a lot of this work for us as well. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to jump into the Arctic Wolf solution because it hits a lot of these points that I've been talking about as well. And I'll jump over there right now. So we're going to start with the Arctic Wolf overview. And the biggest thing that I mentioned, and I did mention for a reason, is the effectiveness problem. So when we look at really what's happening nowadays is there's over 3,000 vendors, a huge spend, and look at the size of the breaches. And these are the reported breaches. We can multiply this out by the unreported breaches as well, that people do not have enough people staffing to do with what they have with the products they've purchased. And there's lots of different things. I usually go right back to the Target breach. It's rather old, but it really reflects the effectiveness problem because they had all the tools in place and they didn't have enough time and staff to do all with what the findings they found. And that's the biggest problem, is the effectiveness problem. We buy the big tools, we don't have the people to do anything with the results from those tools. Now the focus is going to be more on this operational mindset. So Arctic Wolf has adopted the NIST framework. If you're not familiar with NIST, it's the National Institute Standards and Technology. It's a voluntary guidance based on standards, guidelines, best case practices, and organizations, and it's used to better manage and reduce cyber risk. So I'm going to walk you really quick through some of these as well. So these are the 5 main pillars. Identify the first one there. It's all about identifying physical software assets, their vulnerabilities, their threats to internal and external organizations. When we're looking at protect, it supports the ability to limit or contain the impact of potential cybersecurity events. Detect defines the appropriate activities to identify the occurrence of a cybersecurity event, such as an anomaly, events that have been detected, their potential impact is understood, and how continuous monitoring capabilities can improve upon that. Then we have respond. It supports the ability to contain the impact of the potential incident actually happens. And then we have recover. So this is focused on implementing improvements based on lessons. So if something does happen, we know how to recover from it. And we're looking for better outcomes to learn from your mistakes, so you can get back up to business in a more readily fashion. Now, Arctic Wolf services assist the organizations in their effort to implement effectiveness security operations using this type of framework. So that's really why we adopted this. Next, taking the operational approach means we had to put 5 main things in place. From our perspective, this is how you get a security effectiveness and what you're looking in today's threat landscape. So first thing is broad visibility. Organizations should have total visibility in their environment. Their security capabilities should span end-to-end, including a network, cloud, endpoints, and all managed from a single platform. It's very important so you don't have all these disparate management systems for additional staff needed. The 24/7, eyes on glass, not just alerting, eyes on glass, means someone's actually looking at the screen to identify things as they happen. So threat detection, incident response, proactive risk management, all these are covered for 24/7 coverage. Then you have the access to the experts. We talked about that on the original slide, is people are certified on specific portions. They're experts, they're analysts, they're engineers, they're highly certified on vendors. These are the people that you can leverage and use for guidance within these systems and these operating systems that you're looking for all these managed risk pieces. And we have strategic guidance. You should continually review your architectures, your configurations, effort to minimize the attack. This isn't set and forget it. People that do that are not being effective doing security. They need to continually set and change policies based on things that have changed in those environments. And then that leads me to continuous improvement, which means we're setting benchmarks and we're improving those benchmarks and those baselines. So we know if there's change in that environment, if ransomware is happening, and we know how to improve that next time. And we're getting more secure. We're making us more resilient to things by doing continuous improvements. A big piece of the Arctic Wolf solution is the concierge security team. This is a team that's really going to be there to handhold and give you guidance. So it's a core component of their service. It really is. We believe that in order to offer you a truly personalized customer experience, the name concierge team is really required. And it really is a true extension of your team. This isn't to replace anyone. This is actually to augment what you're currently doing with additional staff that you don't have to hire at about a third of the price. So it really makes more sense than hiring people with this type of a service offering. Then we get into the next part of this, the other half, which is the triage team. The triage team works 24/7, 365. They're there to investigate alerts generated by the Arctic Wolf team. This provides a tactical support, the guidance to customers, and the concierge during these security events can really help and assist everything that you are going through. There's somebody you can really call and reach out to if there's a question and guide you through what's really happening in those environments. The next piece of this is the actual products, their platform, their service. So now I'm just going to walk you through how all that plays out. So first we have to look at the platform itself. So at the very bottom, we're leveraging anything that you can really think of, the users, the devices, the applications. We're going to ingest all of that. And they have all these different telemetries that can work and pull additional information in, along with those proprietary SIMs and different things that are on the platform piece of this as well. So their SIM is a purpose-built proprietary platform. So they're not adopting someone else's SIM and honing it to accommodate the need here. This was purpose-built just to do what this service is all about. So keep that in mind. And then at the top, we take all this information and we put it into our three products. So we have managed detection and response. That is kind of the flagship here. We're the ones that are the eyes on glass, doing 24/7 monitoring of all those disparate tools, centralizing them within this single platform and correlating them through the SIM back to a physical person to make sure there's no false positives, and then turns that into something actionable. Very similar, you'd have the exact same team with the managed risk product as well. And this is managed vulnerability scanning on premise, which they're going to manage all that for you. They're going to run those continuous scans, make sure we're being more proactive. So if something new comes on that network, we want to know about it and what to do to make sure that it's part of our set policies, or we can restrict that as well by understanding if it's something that came onto the environment that shouldn't be. And then the last piece that's rather new is our managed security awareness training. So managed security awareness can be kind of tolling on an organization, but it really is a must nowadays, because no matter how much you put in place as far as proactively trying to protect endpoints and email, if an end user clicks on an email because they don't know better, you've basically bypassed everything there. And then all that security really doesn't matter. So we need to educate those people. So instead of buying another tool, another application to work through your organization, come up with all these different programs, do phishing and social engineering and different things to try to test your employees, and then education around that, we have an entire platform and manage the whole thing for you, which just would give you reporting on the back end, how everybody did, who clicked, who got educated, things like that. And we'll get further into that as well later. So the first piece here, this is the MDR. It is managed by the concierge security team. Like I said, very important part of this. The purpose of the solution is to help you defend against advanced threats that bypass preventional tools. That's what I was just talking about. We know this capability is very badly needed, because when we first put this in, 70% of our newer environments, we uncover active threats that were missed by those prevention tools that are already in those environments. So keep that in mind. That's very important, that 70% of people already have something that's infected in those companies that we find. Very important. When we're talking about the concierge security team, they learn from your environment. They tune everything to maximize the effectiveness based on your uniqueness, your compliance needs, whatever it really is going to be impactful for your specific need. The 24/7 coverage ensures critical incidents are identifiable with 5 minutes and then alerted within 30 minutes. That's really unprecedented. The competition, as far as my understanding, are anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. So 30 minutes is amazing. Alert triage. So 24/7 team of security experts, they're there to investigate alerts generated by that Arctic Wolf platform. This team provides tactical support, guidance to customers, and then the concierge team during those security events pushes those over to your teams for actionable hands-on keyboard remediations. Threat hunting. The concierge security team, once again, they're proactively looking for active threats, identifying anomalies in your indicated risk. Sorry, I can't talk today. Manage containment. So once we figure out all what's going on, we find something that's in that environment, incident is identified, we can contain that at the network level on the host, so we can quarantine them, so we have actionable items to do once we have that host off the network as well. And then broad visibility. We want to see across those endpoints, that cloud, that network, to make sure we're not missing anything as well. Brings me to the actual architecture itself. This is very high level. So you can see here, I always work from the lower left over. As you can see, we have a physical sensor we put in place in these environments. Smaller locations, as long as they're off of the main headquarters, we can do a virtual sensor as well. And that's going to be for your network protection. All the different protocols, all the different things we see here, your firewall logs, your IDSs, your HTTP, any wireless email gateways, things like that. And then we have the next piece. You can see the agent. So those remote workforce that we were talking about before, we'd put a remote agent on each one of those, because if they're not VPN'd into that network, they would be invisible. So not everybody's VPN'd 100% of the time. We want to make sure we always have visibility into that, PC. So we have that agent on there feeding our, AWS data lake, where we set all our policy to. And then we have all the cloud pieces of that I mentioned as well. Large cloud adoption, so we got to get visibility into those. Tons of API hooks. So we're also pulling in information off all those cloud APIs into this platform, so it can all be correlated from one single point of one location. And then it goes through that proprietary SIM to that concierge team, and then back to you as remediation instructions. Next product here is the managed risk. So once again, it's going to be the exact same team, named individuals. You're going to get to know your team if you adopt this solution. It's not just hundreds of people and they're a number. This is going to be a named group of people that you're going to utilize for this solution, which is very nice. So on the detection response incidents, on managed risk, it is good and necessary, but managed risk is designed to help you prevent incidents in the first place. That's the more proactive side I was discussing before. We know this capabilities is really badly needed. Because the Center for Internet Security says 80% of breaches could have been prevented in organizations if they just met the 5 CIS top controls. Just 5, not the 20, the 5. So what we can do with this tool is really reflects this concierge team. It always goes back to this team. This is an amazing team. They're going to be doing network vulnerability scanning, both internal and external. They can do internal vulnerability. We can make sure that's continuous. Scanning every 2 hours is pretty standard. We can also get your public IPs, your domains, do external scans as well. We have host space vulnerability assessments as well, utilizing that same agent that would be utilized in the MDR. So if you adopt the MDR and manage risk, it utilizes the same agent for both on those remote desktops and laptops, things like that, or remote employees if we ever get to travel again. And then to complete the managed risk, you also look beyond vulnerabilities, to risk beyond the software. These are things they're looking for your configurations, security controls, benchmarks. We're actually doing threat hunting with this as well to make sure that your credentials, your passwords, your domains, your emails have not been taken over to the dark web and are not public as well. So we know we need to make those changes as well. So just keep that in mind. It's all part of this service. When we get to the architecture of managed risk, looks very familiar. We do have a scanner that's required. We can do this in a virtual on a server as well. And as you can see here, the different things we're looking for in internal. So vulnerability of your data, your Nmap, your network inventory, things like that. So it's searching, broad and wide, making sure we're covering every asset that's in that environment. Network scanning, like I said, we have the dark and gray web intel, the DNS, different things like that. We do have a piece called the CSPM, the Cloud Security Posture Management, and that's for scanning those cloud environments as well. And that would be an add-on to this product. And then endpoint scanning. So like I said before, we add that agent. That agent is now going to be able to scan that environment that's not within your network if they're not VPN'd in, and then pull that back with that and add those to those results as well. It's a pretty nice platform. The last one we started talking about was the managed security awareness training. So this is the brand new thing that's really out there. That's only been out a few months, but very effective. A lot of adoption here. So get started is really where the impact is with 90% of cybersecurity targeting employees. And keep in mind, it's not endpoints, it's not brute force stuff anymore. They're targeting people now. So keep that in mind. There's definitely a need to educate your employees based on what I was telling you before. They're targeting every single person. They're going on the social media. They're trying to gain password access, credentials, learn about you to send a phishing email that's going to entice you to get you to click on that. So keep that in mind. They're targeting people, not as much as our tools anymore. And that's why this is so important. This is a fully managed service that prepares employees to stop social engineering attacks and reduce the risk of human error in your networks and organizations. This includes awareness coaching for your IT team, ongoing micro learning, 24/7 account takeover monitoring, fully managed, which means it eliminates administrative overhead. That's very important. It does take a lot of time and a lot of resources in order to create your own program with these other tools that are out there. We manage the whole thing for you. We do other things like phishing simulations, and then it all comes back to reporting back to you just to know how everybody's doing. Obviously, we're going to keep you in the loop in the whole thing. So I use this slide to basically show how AWN, which is Arctic Wolf Networks, solves for alert fatigue. If you look at the top there, the average size is 24 users, 150 servers, and 4 sensors. This is the way we kind of size things out. It's showing you just how many observations, how many incidents, and then ultimately all that is filtered down to just 2 incidents a week, which really shows you how impactful this service is with that eyes on glass. When we can go from 165 million to 2 within that week. That's really unprecedented. So just keep in mind, the traditional biggest problem in security focus is the dedicated time and people it takes for those SIM tools. Arctic Wolf's security solution, this operation approach, is really going to take that to the next level. They're going to take all that information. You're going to not need a SIM. They have their own SIM and correlate everything in your environments. So we're kind of wrapping up a little bit here. So why become an Arctic Wolf customer? The biggest thing is you're going to benefit from the effectiveness, the efficiency that we deliver. We get you the protection you need at a price you really can't afford. Like I said, it's kind of a third of the price of hiring your own talent and putting all your own systems in yourself. So it really is more affordable than doing it yourself in-house. And why the competition's able to do, 1 or 2 of these things, you'll find the Arctic Wolf is really one of the only ones that can do them all. So we believe that nobody else in the industry can really have this combination of protectiveness, resilience, guidance, and value you're going to get out of this product. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Brian, for this great session. So we're gonna turn it on to a couple of questions here that I noted. If I may, I'm gonna start. Maybe you want to expand on, what would be Arctic Wolf's perspective around, all the ransomwares out there. I'd like to get your perspective on that, and also about security insurance. So maybe you want to elaborate a little bit on Arctic Wolf's perspective on this.
Yeah, perfect. Those are great questions. Very pertinent. Seems like I have those conversations a couple times a week at this point. So ransomware as a whole, obviously we've seen all these different breaches. They're happening more and more often. We see all the different reported breaches, and then there's probably 4 times, 10 times unreported breaches that are in the environments as well. Arctic Wolf, being that continuous 24/7 eyes on glass, can really be effective with ransomware, because the whole point is to establish baselines once we're in these environments. As I said on some of those slides, we already find things that might be existing when we first onboard as well. So we can actually remediate some of the things that might be already existing in those environments. with that dwell time, and dwell time being over that 200-day mark. It's just too much. They can do whatever they want. They're trying to spread laterally, get into those environments to try to do some of that change management, encrypt some of those systems so they can do a ransomware type breach. With our effectiveness, our eyes on glass, all of our tools, we have visibility into all these environments. So that just can't happen anymore. We're looking for change management. If something happens in those environments, we can make those changes. We can quarantine an endpoint within 2 minutes, and then remediation instructions in 30 minutes or less. So the worry can go down just because we are effectively monitoring all those systems and any entry point they might have. And that's really the main focus. Things like they might introduce as well as, if you don't have multi-factor authentication, they're going to make those recommendations. One of the easiest ways to remediate or not be infected by ransomware is just have multi-factor authentication. So that could just be some guidance. Be like, hey guys, you might want to, your vendor of choosing, add multi-factor. That'll be another form of protection in these environments if it's not already existing. So the visibility and the guidance are really going to help out with that ransomware. And that's really what keeps people up at night, is what do we do if something happens? They can also help set those policies. There's a lot of things to know before something might happen, and what are the steps and stages we're going to act on if that happens. Once again, all that guidance they're going to offer you for those type of things. That's very, very good question. The second part of that really reflects that as well as cybersecurity insurance. Most of the new policies are not going to pay the ransom. They're going to pay for the remediation only. And one of the requirements is going to be that same, we need continuous monitoring in those environments. We need a SIM. We need somebody eyes on glass watching it, or we're not going to cover whatever the terms of those policies might be. So that's where Arctic Wolf can effectively cover those parameters for those insurance carriers if you do want to adopt cybersecurity insurance. And in a side note, make sure when you're signing those, you have a attorney that focuses on cybersecurity insurance. Look at any caveats. Obviously, their main point is not to pay if something happens. So make sure all your, your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed. Make sure attorney reviews all those documents, and then someone like Arctic Wolf can fill those continuous needs for those policies. Hope that helps answer that question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very good answer. Thank you, Brian. Another question that comes to mind here. There's so much solution out there in the marketplace. I'm curious actually to understand a little bit about the competitive landscape out there, or how basically you guys are differentiating yourselves towards all the solutions in the marketplace. So maybe you want to comment a little bit on that.
Sure, 100%. So, as my expertise, I do, have some focus on Arctic Wolf, but I also cover several other vendors as well. So the big confusion really most people start with is the terminology. People are using terms like MDR and XDR and SIM as a service and SOC as a service. And for most vendors that are out there, that definition is definitely different depending who you're talking to. So if somebody says, I have an MDR solution, they're not giving you a full solution, as I just discussed, like the Arctic Wolf solution. They're going to be like, well, our MDR focuses on our EDR endpoint, and we might add a couple components of networking and maybe some cloud monitoring, but it's not a full robust solution, and they're just focusing on the endpoint. When you hear something like XDR, like some terminology from vendors, is the extension of the EDR endpoint that might include those factors. And that could be managed or unmanaged, which is XDR. It could just be a tool versus a service. And are you focusing on just the endpoint once again, or the extension of that endpoint? Where other people use the term XDR, that's open XDR. That means bring your technology and we'll monitor and manage it for you. Some might be just, here's a tool, this is going to help you on premise, and all those disparate management solutions can be managed in one location. But think of Arctic Wolf as a managed XDR platform. So that's the open technology, the open definition of bring anything you have, and then that XDR tool that some people just have an on-premise tool, we're doing a managed version of that from Arctic Wolf. Then there's also things like you might hear SIM as a service. So SIM as a service is an option as well, where you might have a vendor or a partner go out there and manage your SIM for you, but you might need to have that SIM and those licenses already, and they're just going to manage the outcomes and the correlation of something you have existing. They're not supplying you with a SIM, correlation, staffing for remediation and guidance like Arctic Wolf. They're literally saying, hey, we correlated the information and the licenses you have currently. This is the outcomes. Have a good day. And they kind of go hands off at that point. So you really want to understand those different technologies out there, and they all operate different, and all those definitions are confusing. And this is kind of where I stand and where I operate from, and go with the best solution approach is it has to fit the need properly, and you really have to dig down and make sure you're getting exactly what you need. Because if you don't ask the pertinent questions, you might not get exactly what you're asking for, because those definitions are different depending who you talk to.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. For the benefit of the audience here, one of the things that I noticed, I mean, there's a various, company-sized businesses that are logged on to this conference that we have for the 2 days. Some of them are smaller and medium-sized business here. What would be your thoughts, Brian, around having into a certain size company, or small or medium sized company, having their own security operations center? Should they have it or shouldn't they have it? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, it really stands on the maturity of what they might currently have. So a lot of SMB customers, they might already do NOC services, and then their customers might start asking for firewalls and endpoint to go along with those. And that's their current provider of, network, management services. So they might add that to it. As we keep evolving, we keep adding email and web and patching and DNS and all these different things. That's getting more and more developed. When you start getting into the continuous monitoring, we were adding SIMs, the cost factor goes through the roof. So SIM technology and licensing can be well over hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then if you look at most of the third parties mentioned in the videos as well, that can be 10 to 20 staff just to monitor that effectively for a solution that you have to go to market and figure all that part out. So that's where a third party like Arctic Wolf can fill that gap. They can augment what you're currently doing. So you might have firewall, endpoint, web, all that stuff. You might have a team in place, but the SIM part is just so expensive and so time consuming. You can partner with someone like Arctic Wolf. They can do all the third party backend, correlate all that information through their SIM with all those sensors and agents, and then give you an output that now you can go to market with your customers for as well. So now for approximately a third of the price of staffing technology, you can have an offering that you can have an upper tier to go to your customers with. So you can actually do a lot more with less. So now the SMB focused partners and end users can take advantage of more for less. And that's the key, because people in those smaller spaces, they need security, but they just can't afford it. So if you can offer them to a smaller price point, almost a third less than what they might be, trying to develop themselves or, understand or buy themselves by doing their own SIM, they can now afford that same, type of technology and that same offering, and it includes the staff. So that's something to keep in mind. It's really needed from the very bottom, the smallest companies all the way up, but they can't afford it. So this is a way to be able to get the same technology, the same coverage, lower those risk factors for a lot less money doing it through a third party like Arctic Wolf.
Okay, thank you. It kind of answered the last question I had, but maybe there are some additional comments to add around that. But it was around, what would be the most common, SOC challenges. You mentioned around, the smaller companies or corporations having, maybe limited budget, or, the cost associated with that. But do you see any additional challenges that comes to mind when we look at SOC options?
Yeah, so just pretty much to emphasize what I just said, and you're right, I covered a lot of that as well, is if an SMB, a small, medium business, is going to adopt some of the more intelligent tools, so let's say EDR and email and web and all these different technologies, they're all disparate management interfaces. So you need multiple staff usually to do something with those and correlate the information back to each other to have something to remediate and understand what to remediate from all these different management interfaces, and the staff to do it. Why wouldn't you get a third party that can pull in all that information into a single pane of glass, and then they're going to put that in a data lake? So now they're setting policy to all that information, all those disparate tools in one location. And then they can set policy and rules to that with the third-party solution and the staffing. So you can take like a 3 to 5 size environment for security engineers and analysts you might have now, and then turn that into 15 people that will be part of that service. So you're really just an extension, a true partnership where you're going to grow your security risk tolerances, your staffing by adding that third party and doing more with less. And that's the key too. And then that person might not have to wear 5 hats anymore and not sleep as much. We all work 10 to 12 hour days. They can get a little less and focus more maybe on project work and things like that than watching those screens all the time.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers
Excellent.
the question.
So, okay, well, thank you very much. That's the questions that were brought up for today's session. So, in the name of NoviPro, Brian, I thank you very much for your time and the good presentation this morning. I'm going to switch to French now, just quickly for the audience here, the local audience here. Donc, je vous invite, si vous avez des questions ou des commentaires, vous pouvez directement, comme je l'ai mentionné au début de la conférence, aller dans le boot du conférencier. Donc, s'il y a des choses plus techniques, Brian va pouvoir y répondre. Sinon, l'équipe étendue de NoviPro et de Arctic Wolf sans aucun problème. Je vous invite aussi à répondre aux petits sondages sur la conférence. Et puis, sur ce, je vous souhaite une excellente fin de journée. Thank you and have a great rest of the day. Thanks very much.
Thank you.